Right, we've now got a section called Crossfire, which is supposed to be about 20 minutes, and as if we haven't been having Crossfire already then, of course. A more intensive version of the same thing, perhaps. This consists of 2 minutes comment and response time. So it's much more rapid than the bigger blocks of time. I'm conscious of the time, however. It's nearly 9 o'clock. We're supposed to be out of here by 9:30, although Abdullah tells me there's some flexibility on that, because I'm anxious to get questions and answers, questions and comments from you in as well. So if we immediately go to the Crossfire section, 20 minutes it's supposed to be, 2 minutes per side, comments and response time, and I presumably we can now go back to the Muslim side to start that 2 minutes, and please keep it reasonably civilized.
Okay, let's start now. I know I haven't spoken much in the debate. It's because I'm taking over last minute from my colleague Sami. I just wanted to start on a discussion on methodology, guys. You've been quoting Ibn Ishaq, Tariq, Tabari, left, right, and centre, as well as the so-called Sahih Sitta, which not everyone considers to be Sahih, with the exception of Bukhari and Muslim, such as Ibn Majah, Tirmidhi. Can, in future, you guys start giving us the reasons why we should accept these isnads, and who's accepted these isnads according to Hadith methodology? Secondly, you go on about historical methods with the Sirah literature. According to Joseph Horowitz, in his book, Prophet Muhammad and his earliest biographers, talks about the antiquity and origin of the isnad, and he talks about how, with Sirah authors, they incorporated the isnad when they could, but because their compilations were such basic ones, they were the first of their type, so to speak. We can't trust everything that's in them. Ironically, Michael Cook agrees on the same thing in his article, Maghazi and Sirah in Early Scholarship.
Sure. Also, a lot of fallacy they committed is they said, well, the Sirah is the earliest literature. No, it's not. There are hadiths which are traced back really early. So the Bukhari and Muslim are just when they became the famously canonized, but there were hadiths which were traced back much earlier, before that time. But they want to bring it because it's not been checked. First he said, yeah, it's true, it's not been checked. Then he goes, but he went around checking. David was contradicting himself when he talked about the Sirah of Ishaq. So I want him to be consistent on this and say that Ibn Ishaq didn't check or he checked. Right? He contradicted himself on this. As for the issue of Asma, the issue of inciting violence, we have narration here. She's inciting violence to kill Prophet Muhammad, to fight against the Muslims. Khaybar, I want to challenge him. Read out to me the quote which said that civilians were killed at the Battle of Khaybar, the siege of Khaybar, and I would like the source, please.
Okay, that's it. 2 minutes over to David.
Well, that is a lot to respond to. We'll try to respond to a few things. What is our methodology? Well, we look everywhere we can possibly go. In Islam, we look to the Quran. When we look to the Quran, we see peaceful passages and violent passages. We say, okay, how does Islam reconcile them? We read in the Quran, you reconcile them through abrogation. Okay, the only question then is, what were the final marching orders? The final marching orders were, fight those who do not believe. We say, we don't want to believe that that's really the case in Islam. Let's go somewhere else. Muslims, who's your greatest commentator? Well, we have some good commentators. Ibn Kathir is probably the best one. We go to Ibn Kathir. Call everyone to Islam. If they don't accept, fight them until they're dead. Well, we really don't want to believe that. Is there any other place to go? Yes, you can go to the Hadith. We open the Hadith. What's your most reliable Hadith? Well, go to Sahih al-Bukhari and go to Sahih Muslim. We open those. We find the exact same thing. Fight people until they recite the Shahada. And if we want to ask non-Muslim historians, where do you go? They would say you go to the earlier sources if you can get to them. That would be sources like Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq, we read about the life of Muhammad. Ibn Ishaq is one of the bloodiest books in history. So everywhere we could possibly go, we find violence. And then Muslims say, oh, don't believe any of that. Reinterpret everything and throw out all of our sources. Well, if all of your sources agree with us, and you don't want us to believe what all of your sources say, I don't know where we're supposed to go, and I don't know what sort of method you would have us use.
Regarding Asma, I would like to simply say, you say that she was inciting violence. Please tell me the words she used to incite violence. To me, she was writing a poem of lament. So please tell me, you say she was writing words of violence to incite. Let me know what those are. Do you have anything else to mention? 20 seconds.
Okay, I'll just read the poem. This is what she said. I despise bin Malik and al-Nabit and Auf and Khazraj. You obey a stranger who is none of yours, one not of Murad or Muhaj. Do you expect good from him after killing your chiefs, like a hungry man waiting for a cook's broth? Is there no man of pride who would attack him by surprise and cut off the hopes of those who expect? Yes, she was inciting, but...
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much.
It's interesting that David and Nabil say that they go to every source they can, probably because they're so limited in their scope, because they don't know Arabic. We've seen already today, Nabil Qureshi quoted a hadith about the Prophet beating Aisha. In the break, I checked it up, and the word actually used is falakada, which means to press, according to Lane's Arabic dictionary. Now, we don't know why Aisha got bruised from that, but Nabil, I wish you would try and be a little more intellectually honest when you investigate these things, as we did mention it in our debate with David last time. As for Western scholars saying that the Sirah is more reliable as it's earlier, David, I've quoted you two that don't say that, and talk about the superiority of the Isnad. Can you quote me at least 3, and tell me what their reasons are, and tell me what their credentials are as well?
Got a minute left.
Yeah, the main contention is they don't actually quote to us any legally binding text from the Muslims. They say, oh, this is it. They're so desperate to go to these reports, which were probably a lot of the pagan Arabs. They converted to Islam, and they still had a lot of their culture. They brought out their culture into their understandings of Islam, and so they were saying all kinds of stories and things. That's why we had to invent a hadith system to trace reliable reporters. That's why we did it in the first place. You see, it's for that very fact that we need to have traced hadith. Now, my point to them is, sure. My point to them is, will they not quote legally binding narration to show that Muslims must kill non-Muslims wantonly, and to take away their rights, or to force convert them to Islam, or to kill them because they speak about Prophet Muhammad? I've got a source here dated 150 years, which says that the non-Muslim is not killed for denying the Prophet Muhammad and even speaking it. It's rather, it's only blasphemy issues, which again we believe in as Muslim Jews and Christians, or at least Christians believe in for some time.
Thank you, Abdullah.
He wants us to cite authoritative sources. Surah 929, fight those who do not believe. How could that statement be any more clear? What can he say? What can he say to make that statement more clear? I don't know. That seems like an authoritative source. If you don't like, you're a Sunni Muslim. What do you do when you have Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim? I've been called to fight people until they recite the Shahada. That is crystal clear. If you don't agree with them, go to Ibn Kathir or something like that. Everyone agrees with us. So our case is not, hey, Ibn Asaq says. Our case is Ibn Asaq says, and he agrees with your greatest commentators, and he agrees with us with the Hadith, and he agrees with the Quran. There's a clear pattern here. Regarding the issue of Arabic, look, if I have spent since the 90s studying Islam and I can't hope to understand basic commands of Islam, how can this be the religion for everyone? I ask you, if no one can understand Islam without being born in Saudi Arabia somehow, something like that, what good is this? What good is this religion for mankind?
I would also like to respond to the issue of Aisha again. I would ask, without impugning you in any way, I would like to ask you, please finish the hadith. Does it not say Aisha was hit on the chest or pressed on the chest, causing her pain? That's the issue that I'm concerned with. It says causing her pain. And Aisha's been through a lot, by the way. In Bukhari 6845, Abu Bakr struck Aisha violently. You see the same thing in Muslim 3506. In fact, Aisha herself says this in Bukhari 5825. I have not seen any woman suffering as much as the believing woman, the Muslimah. Aisha saying, I have not seen any woman suffer as much as Muslim women. This is me saying this.
And this was a reference to a woman who was beaten so bad that her skin turned green and Muhammad did not rule in her favor.
So I need to ask you in response, you're saying to me, why are you not going to authoritative things? Why are you not, well, we're going to the Quran, we're going to Hadith, we're going to Tafsir, we're going to Sirah, we're going to everything we can possibly imagine. You tell me, why are the commentators so confused? Why are the greatest commentators of Islam saying Islam is violent, and you, here in the West, saying, oh, well, why are they so wrong?
Okay, as far as the greatest commentators are concerned, I've noticed that you like to quote several commentators. Throughout this whole debate, I've heard you quote 3, which are Jalalain, which is one of the most basic introductory tafsirs I've ever seen in my life. You quoted Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawzi and Ibn Taymiyyah, who happen to come from the same kind of line of reasoning. Why haven't we seen you quote from anyone like Fakhruddin al-Razi or any of our major Sunni tafsirs?
Also, they say, the Quran says, fight them until they, or the Hadith says, fight until they say, La ilaha illallah. Alright, so why jizya? Why not keep fighting until they say, La ilaha illallah? Why jizya then? Why this option for them to join the state? Why? You see, they want to restrict it because they want to say, it's like I'm saying, Jesus said, I have not come to bring peace. and I've got the sword, and I leave it like that. You see, Jesus is a violent person. He says, I'm not going to bring peace, but the sword. And you say to me, finish that verse. Look what it's saying. You see, so if you're going to ask us to do something, you've got to do it yourself as well. If you want to say, I'll take early literatures, sorry, if you want to talk about the pressing, when Prophet Muhammad pressed Aisha, thing is, there was another story where the Prophet Muhammad, he was straightening the Muslims in their line, and he had this small stick, just pushing people back. And one person said, ow, you hurt me. And the Prophet Muhammad said, did I? And he pulled up, the Prophet Muhammad opened up his shirt and said, like, take your revenge on me like I've done to you. And the person said no, and just kissed it. Yes, all right, so he crossed his wife, and he might have hurt her, and so on. It's called accidents. Accidents happen. But no, this is a situation where he deliberately hit her. He deliberately hit her. That's what they're trying to twist it as. And it doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't say he struck her. They just pressed her and it hurt her. Yeah, it goes against a more authentic narration which says that he never raised
more widely transmitted.
Yeah, and more widely transmitted that says that he never raised his hand against any woman at all whatsoever. Why don't he quote that? You know why? Picking and choosing things they can twist. Yeah, to feed their rhetoric to justify what they're saying.
Thank you very much.
I am not picking and choosing things. I want to tell you again, I really hope Islam is as peaceful as you say it is. But the fact of the matter is, when I quote these hadith, I'm quoting them for what they're saying. Now here, Muhammad, read the hadith for them if you're saying I'm lying. In the hadith, Aisha goes out and follows Muhammad somewhere, and Muhammad is not happy with the fact that Aisha followed him, so he turns around, and in his confrontation, he hits her in the chest or presses her, causing her pain. Does that sound like an accident? Absolutely not. He also asked, why are we just quoting certain commentators? You completely missed the question that I asked, which is, if Islam is so peaceful as you say it is, why are there so many commentators who are saying otherwise? Why are they so wrong? And I'll tell you why we're quoting just these commentators, because we're actually going to the commentators and reading what they say. We're not just going to the internet and picking random things. We're going through, David and I went through Ibn Majah, we went through parts of Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, not to pick and choose things, but to see what they say. And what they say is this, repeatedly.
I have spent thousands and thousands of dollars, every dime I get, on Muslim commentaries. Please tell me, how much do I have to spend before I get to one that promotes peace towards all unbelievers? I don't know.
Fakhruddin and Razi apparently were next. If you don't mind, could you phone that for us?
Why jizya? Why were non-Muslims given the, well, Christians and Jews, why were they given the option of jizya? I quoted the passage in al-Bukhari, because they're going to pay for your children. They're paying your descendants. This is your piggy bank.
I see people
right
rolling
here.
their eyes. This is Bukhari. This is not us.
I find that it doesn't matter what we quote. It doesn't matter what source we quote. We're just wrong. I'm sorry, I wanted to get on to something else, but I can't do it in 20 seconds. So I'll just say once again, what method are we supposed to use? Because it seems what Abdullah and Yahya are telling us is ignore the clearest verses of the Quran, ignore the clearest passages in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, ignore everything you read in our earliest biographical source, ignore everything and just believe us, a couple of Western Muslims who've grown up in the West and now we believe Islam is peaceful.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David.
Okay, David, again, that's a very nice rhetorical statement to make. I'm sure everybody found it amusing. However, what I've been telling you to do, David, is go back to see what these Western scholars I've quoted for you. These are Orientalists, these are not Muslim scholars, and they're agreeing with what the Muslims have been saying. In fact, Nabil's debate with Shadid Lewis tells us that we need to go back to scholarly peer reviews on works. Now, I've downloaded 2 scholarly peer reviews of Ghulam's translation of Ibn Ishaq. Let's see what Tibawi says. As it stands, Professor Ghulam's translation cannot be accepted as a reliable reproduction of received Arabic text of the Sirah. Now, this is not from a Muslim journal, this is actually from a Western academic journal. So I would prefer if you would actually start going back to reliable, decent information. And as for the methodology of Sirah writers, I just thought I would quote someone who apparently Answering Islam considers as an authority since they quoted them on their website. This is al-Hafidh al-Iraqi, who wrote the book Al-Fiyat al-Sirat al-Nabawiyya. He says the following: let the seeker of knowledge know that the Sirah collects every account, whether true or false, but the intention is to mention all that is conveyed in the books of Sirah, regardless of the isnad.
Yeah, and next we're going to buy some Gnostic Gospels to refute Christianity. So anyway, as for the issue of finding unbelievers and pagans to get money to pay for your children, yeah? Why did they mention there was a tribe, a Jewish tribe, that said, you know what, we're not going to pay jizya, but our armed men, our fighting men, will join your armies, and as long as we get a fair share of the booty, is it fine? You can do that. Exemption from jizya. It was to fund the military effort to defend the borders and to fight against oppression. That's what it was. Why didn't they mention that? Is it because they don't know or they don't want to mention that? Secondly, has anyone here ever accidentally hurt a member of their family? Right? Sorry, who hasn't hurt a member of their family, rather? Right? If you have, then are you also like the Prophet Muhammad? And what they're trying to say is a wife beater.
Well, once again, we've been criticized as if we just appeal to Ibn Ishaq. That's not. And again, if you think history has been corrupted by the time you get to Ibn Ishaq, it's surely much more corrupted a century later. But that's absolutely, don't get it wrong, not what we did. We look to Ibn Ishaq. What does it say? We look to the Quran. What does it say? We look to your most reliable collections of ahadith. What do they say? We look to your greatest commentators. What do they say? Every single place we can go agrees with what we're saying, not with what our opponents are saying. He compares us going to Ibn Ishaq with someone else going to the Gnostic Gospels. The Gnostics weren't even Christians. They had no access to good historical records that contradicted the teachings of the Bible. Was Ibn Ishaq a non-Muslim person who had no access to people who knew the history of Muhammad? Of course not. Of course not. His father had already begun collecting Sirah literature, and Ibn Ishaq continued this tradition. So he is a historian. If he didn't say all kinds of things that you really don't like, you would think he's a good historian as well. What about the tribe that didn't pay the jizya? Well, all I can say is Muhammad ordered in the Quran, 929, fight them until they pay the jizya. So all you're saying is some Muslims didn't follow what Muhammad taught. That's great. I hope Muslims in the West never do follow those teachings. But that doesn't mean that these people are representatives of Islam when they do this.
But understand also what Abdullah said. He said those people were instead allowed to fund the Muslims and to offer them fighting resources. Well, that's what the jizya was going to be used for anyway. So it's a matter of still supporting the Muslims. In a way, it was the jizya, but in more of a barter system instead of a monetary system. So yeah, it's still jizya to an extent. And finally, to appeal to rhetoric, he says, haven't you accidentally hurt a family member? I tell you, go to the hadith, read it for yourself. This is not an accident. Muhammad is upset with what Aisha has done, and therefore he strikes her, presses her, hits her, whatever word you want to use, causing her pain intentionally.
Okay, Nabil, did I not just rebuke you on your wrong translation of that hadith, which would indicate I went down and looked at it just now? Wherefore, why are you telling me to go and look at that hadith when I just have? Yeah. The whole thing would suggest the context that Muhammad accidentally beat her. And I think Ali Asai dealt with this incident as well. Unfortunately, I'm not carrying Sahih al-Bukhari with me because I don't have it. This is a Muslim. Sahih Muslim. Leave it. Secondly, as for David, we're going back to your greatest commentator. David, who said he's my greatest commentator? Who said he's Abdullah's greatest commentator? If I were to quote Pope Pius, the one that instigated the Crusades, and say he's your greatest commentator, would you allow me to do that? No, I don't think you would. So stop imposing the pressure onto me, which I don't think you impose on yourself. Secondly, yes, you are both quoting verses of the Quran. What we'd ask you to do is quote the preceding verses and the verses before that. And also quote the other verses which do not feed into your rhetoric here tonight.
Sure. It's not to answer though, but first he said that the jizya was to feed your children, was Muslims to enjoy their various luxuries. Then he said, oh, it was for the war effort. Like, he didn't just contradict himself. Well, he did. I'm glad you changed your mind. Thanks. As for the issue of, didn't you see, I quoted the hadith about the Prophet Muhammad, how we treat dhimmi, how we can't harm them, harming them is harming the Prophet. He didn't talk about it. He didn't say nothing about these sahih hadiths. Is it because he doesn't know, or he doesn't want you to know? Very interesting. Also, just historically speaking, you ever heard of the Mu'ali? The Mu'ali were non-Arab Muslims. During the Umayyad period were slightly Arab nationalists. So, and they wanted jizya tax because the zakat tax they can't control. So what they did was that if a person became a Muslim from the Mu'ali, from a non-Arab background, they still had to pay the jizya, and they still became Muslim even though they had to pay extra tax because they weren't recognized as being real Muslims. They still became Muslim even though they didn't got any special treatment by being Muslim. Why didn't they answer that one?
Okay, David, your final 2 minutes.
Regarding the us quoting Ibn Kathir, pick someone and be consistent. I did not get that for myself. I did not wake up one morning and say, I'm going to quote Ibn Kathir and go around saying this is the greatest Muslim commentator. Contact the Muslims. Who's your greatest commentator? Ibn Kathir. Okay. I quote Ibn Kathir. Hey, don't you dare quote him to us. What is this? Please, I mean, pick. I understand there are different Muslims and so on. You have different preferences. Yeah, he has a Shia and so on. But still, I mean, tell me and then stick with it. Give me a clear explanation of where I'm supposed to go and then stick with it. He said I didn't respond to the passage about treating the dhimmis well. Yes, I did. I quoted al-Bukhari where Muhammad said that the reason for treating the dhimmis well is because they're going to give you money and money to your descendants. This is your source of income. This is where you're getting money for your future generations. Of course you don't want to slaughter them.
Now, regarding what he says about the beef with Aisha, I thought for a moment he said he went and read it, and now he's saying he doesn't have it, and then he didn't even remember what number it was. That's funny to me. I don't understand that. I'm not accusing you of anything. I just don't understand that. I'm telling you, people go read it for yourself. It is not an accident when Muhammad hits her. Sahih Muslim 21:27. He struck her in the chest, causing her pain. Now, finally, I want to talk about the Battle of Tabuk. Understand that there's a context for all the verses of the Quran, why they were revealed, etc. In the context of chapter 9 of the Quran, Surah Al-Bara or Surah Al-Tawbah, depending on what you want to call it, Muhammad was about to go and attack a Roman army north of the Arabian border. This army had never attacked him before. It had never shown any signs of putting an army together to attack him. Yet Muhammad said these people can be attacked. Why? Because of Surah 9:29, which says, fight them, the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission, feel themselves subdued. Why? Again, the very next verse tells you why, because they're the cursed of Allah for believing that Jesus is the Son of God. It's as clear as day. The explanation, the commentary for the Quran, all of it fits together in that way.
Thank you. Right, that concludes the Crossfire section, and now we move to your part of the evening. We can ask some questions, hopefully. There's a 5-minute, we have time. I don't have time to... Okay, we just agreed with 20 minutes for Q&A, and then brief summing up from each side, and then they're going to kick us out. The gentleman here, right in front of me, would like to ask a question.
It's wonderful as a Jew to watch Christians and Muslims debate. We Jews are neutral. But when you follow each other's scriptures, in Islam, you say that Jesus is a prophet. Now to us as Jews, the last prophet God gives us, Israel, is the prophet Malachi. So Jesus says a prophet is not honored among his own, then Jesus is breaking the law of God by calling himself a prophet. But in Christianity, they say Jesus is God. He is Hashem in the human flesh. To us as Jews, when Jesus would have walked into our synagogue, if he had said to the synagogue, I am God, we would have stoned him to death for blaspheming the Creator. But one question I do want to ask the Muslims to reply and the Christians to reply. On the Passover, Jesus goes into the Cheder and he starts the Seder, the Last Supper, right? He takes the challah, he takes the bread, and gives it to his disciples, and asks them to eat his flesh. Then he takes the hagethen, the wine, and says, drink my blood. And then after that, he goes on to the Garden of Gethsemane, where he is crying to God.
So we're going to have a question, we're going to speed this up because we're running out of time.
He's crying to God. So Jesus is arrested, brought before Caiaphas, the high priest of Israel.
We know the story, so what is your question? But both these guys know the story very well.
Could the high priest of Israel, who has to keep the halakha of God, could he try a Jew on the 8 days of Chol Moed, which is the 8 days of Pesach? It is forbidden. So therefore, your scripture has no strength of truth in our Jewish.
I'm not sure this has got to do with the theme of this evening's topic or debate at all. Do you want to speak? I'm sorry, we're going to ignore that. I apologise, we're not going to accept that. It's not on the topic, okay? And can it be one question and not 2 or 3 or 4? Frank, behind.
Sorry.
Would you stand up so we can hear you?
Yeah, so Abdallah, earlier on you said that Christians divided over whether to obey the rulers. I would remind you there is an important article by St. Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologiae on sedition, where Aquinas, a top authority in the Catholic tradition, says that if the ruler does not follow the common good, the good of the community, then it is right for the people to raise up and depose it. So there is a teaching, important teaching, this is about that. Another point I already mentioned, Mr. David, I think it would be fair to say I'm aware of one episode in a report about Tabari in the life of Muhammad where after Taif, where he actually forgave, asked God to forgive those who stoned him because they didn't know he was a prophet. So I think it would be fair somehow to...
Thanks, Frank. Okay, Frank. Abdullah Roy, I think you want to respond to... Abdullah?
Yeah, I mean, as we know, Thomas Aquinas is this great Catholic church father and so on. Yeah, there is debate. I would say there is debate about whether we should follow the ruler no matter what. But if you go back to early sources, Paul's in Romans, he's very clear on this. He's very clear that if only the unrighteous person has to fear the ruler, only the unrighteous person has to fear the tyrant. And if you are good, then you will not be molested by this ruler. And he was talking of Nero at the time, which is, I don't know how he could talk that, but anyway. So if you look at it clearly, there's actually other Christian fathers, Augustine and Calvin and so on, which were saying the opposite, which was saying that basically you have to be bear with patience, forbearance, again, in the face of a tyrannical ruler, and just patiently obey, and so on. And that's what the lot of the Christian is. They were describing. So I guess there is a response to that.
I think very briefly, but you have to take Romans 13 jointly with Revelation 13, where the state has become demonic. And so you don't have to.
I would also, he addressed a question to us as well. I'd like to briefly start by responding. David will finish. I do want to make it clear to everyone. I hope we didn't give the wrong impression. Islam isn't just all violence. That's not what we're saying. Muhammad did forgive people. Muhammad did show peaceful things. Muhammad did take care of the orphans and the widows, and he showed people love in various circumstances. I'm not saying Islam is 100% violent. That's not at all what we're claiming.
And I'll say, for the first 40 years of Muhammad's life, based on what I can find about him, too bad Ibn Asad, I like Muhammad. And for the next 10 years of his life, apart from a few instances like I bring you slaughter, I still like Muhammad. It's not until later. So yes, there are all kinds of things. And even after the move to Medina and following, there are many teachings in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim where I, as a Christian, would look to those and say, that's a good teaching. That is a teaching I could agree with. So it's not that we think Muhammad was horrible in every way or violent in every way. It's just a matter of what are Muslims called to do, and at the end of the day, Muslims are called to fight unbelievers.
Right. The guy with the glasses has been patient. Then the younger guy behind him, and then Adnan at the front. In that order, please. Carry on.
We're talking about Islam as a religion of peace. Please, Abdullah, we know, like, given an example, that Nelson Mandela was oppressed, was mistreated, and was jailed for 27 years, and he came out and he preached peace, forgiveness. We know him as a man of peace. Mahatma Gandhi, a similar story, was maltreated, was jailed for 7 years, he came out, his message was clear: non-violent resistance, peace. The same with Jesus. He was maltreated, he was killed, his dying wish was forgive them. We accept him as a man of peace among the Christian community. How does this compare with the example of Muhammad? Because you're saying that he's also a man of peace.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know what? Thank you for bringing all that up. Excellent. Nelson Mandela, man of peace. How did he get in prison in the first place? It was part of the ANC? ANC, yeah. A violent terrorist group. Funny enough, F.W. de Klerk spoke with Nelson Mandela and said, are you a Christian? He goes, yes. So he said, did you not hear it say in Romans 13 that you have to obey the law of the land? And then Nelson had no response. Interesting, it's a very interesting effect. Also, people must understand, I'm not saying that Islam doesn't have use of force. Of course Islam has use of force. It's because it's responsible. In a way, it's like Augustine. Augustine says that Christians, we should go to war because we love. We love the people so much that we want to help them, correct them, and fight oppression, and even correct the people who are living in an incorrect way of life. Because we love them, we have to do it. I'm not saying that Islam is peaceful, doesn't advocate warfare. I say it does. Because there is no system that you can bring. Is it capitalism superior after all the killing and murder is done? Is communism superior after killing and murder is done? Mass murder, even after it's reached its zenith. You see, I think these guys are trying to box into their kind of understanding to say that it's they're refuting a straw man. We don't say that Islam has no violence, so to speak. We say that Islam has just violence, but for the same reason that Augustine said that Christians should also fight wars.
Okay, thank you. And the young guy, yes, do you want to stand up and
Yeah,
ask a
I'm
question?
referring to one point about the dispute over the caravan. The Christian side claimed that the Muslims stole the goods off the caravan from the pagans, and the Muslim side claimed that they were stealing what was theirs already. Can I ask where the caravans were coming from and what was in the caravans? Just because it was a confusing point.
Yeah, the caravans were coming from Mecca. In fact, before Muhammad even left, when he was talking to the Medinas, because he met with them once in 620 AD, before leaving in 621 AD, I'm sorry, 622 AD, they said, the Meccans said, this man is conspiring with Medinas, but our caravans go straight through Yathrib. It was called Yathrib at the time. Our caravans go straight through Yathrib. So even before Muhammad left, the Muslims were concerned about what would happen to their caravans because they passed through that direction. So it was a Meccan caravan. And he does have, in that effect, the right to say, well, it was their goods. But I've never actually read that it was their goods that were being attacked. It's possible, sure. But I've never seen anywhere where it was. And I'm just asking for the source where he says it was.
And on the issue of the caravans, if you read what we find among the customs of that time, anyone in the city who had anything to contribute would contribute it to the caravan. All the goods would be carried up to some place to trade. And if you would hope that you would return with some extra money. So there's no clear idea here that these were Muslim goods. It certainly wasn't. What we find, though, is that Muhammad was attacking the livelihood of the people of Mecca. This is how many of the people earned their living. And Muhammad attacked that. If your caravan did not come back, you might starve to death. And I would say this was terrorism.
Right, I've just been informed indirectly that we've got 5 minutes. I'm going to be a bit naughty. I'm going to try and push that, but we are under pressure to wrap up the evening. I'll do a couple more speakers, and then we're going to have to ask a couple more questions, and then the summaries after that. So I've asked Adnan. No, Adnan, please.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. I must say that as a Muslim student, I was frustrated by listening to, while I was listening to what you have to say. Very quickly, I want some of the things to be raised again, and then you can comment on them. Ibn Kathir, about 929, if you had read it, I believe you have read it, but not all of it. Read the whole commentary. He mentions that Romans were planning to attack the Muslims. Therefore, Muslims were this was a way of God telling the Muslims to retaliate, defend yourself against the Romans. About the woman being slapped and coming to Muhammad, you haven't read the Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir is great. I love him. Quote him as much as you can. Please do it. Please do it. Because if you read Ibn Kathir completely, you come to realize everything you quoted today was out of context. Ibn Kathir about this word tells us that woman came to Muhammad and Muhammad said, okay, retribution for the man. Go and slap him. You didn't mention that. You said no. Woman came back to Muhammad, and Muhammad said, no, I have received the revelation. But Muhammad told the woman, go back and slap the man on his face the way he slapped you. And later on the revelation came, and then Muhammad called her back and said, I have more power. The issue of Asma the poetess, very quickly. Asma the poetess was one of the tribes, belonging to one of the tribes of Jews. Banu Stalaba, Banu Jafna, Banu Shutayba, Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayza, Banu Qaynuqa, all of these tribes. Read the Treaty of Medina. If you heard Ibn Hisham, you quote again and again Ibn Ishaq. Read it. The Treaty of Medina is there. That was the unanimously agreed upon treaty between Muslims and Jews. All these tribes, they are mentioned, they willingly signed it. One of the clauses of the treaty, this became the law of the country. You are, as good Christians, I'm sure, following the law of the country. In America, if you swore at someone, pushed someone, hurt someone, you should be expecting retribution. Likewise, those Jews who were living in Medina and outskirts, they were breaking these laws. Asma the poetess knew about the treaty. Ka'b bin Ashraf knew about the treaty. Ibn Abi Haqiq was also a Jew, knew the treaty. Other issues coming to, there are many issues.
I know. You're not here to give a lecture as well. Thank you for your comments, though.
I would like to comment.
By the way, Adnan, I'll be here until Monday. If you'd like to step up on stage, I'd be happy to go round two with you. Adnan comments on Ibn Kathir, says, let's look at what Ibn Kathir, I'll give you what Ibn Kathir says about 929 and the call to fight at Tabuk. Allah Most High ordered the believers...
Before you read,
Adnan, please, Adnan, no, sorry.
I must tell you,
Adnan,
this is a real
can't interrupt.
You don't have the
Brother, please do not interrupt.
Allah Most High ordered the believers to prohibit the disbelievers from entering or coming near the sacred mosque. So pagans are no longer allowed to take the pilgrimage to Mecca, which was the main source of income from Mecca. On that, Qureshi thought, Quraysh were now Muslims, on that Quraysh thought that this would reduce their profits from trade. Therefore, Allah Most High compensated them and ordered them to fight the people of the book until they embraced Islam or paid the jizya. Allah says, and then he quotes 28 and 29, therefore the Messenger of Allah decided to fight the Romans in order to call them to Islam. What was the source of this revelation? The Meccans were worried that they weren't going to get any more money from the pilgrims to Mecca. They complained to Muhammad. Muhammad says, don't worry, we're going to fight the Romans, and they're going to pay us the jizya. There's your income. There's nothing here about the Romans coming and attacking them.
Thank you, David. Abdullah wants 30 seconds to respond to this as well.
Yeah, Tabuk. What's happened at Tabuk? The Muslim army came, no Romans. Set for a bit. Okay, they're not attacking, let's go back. And they went back. Does that sound like an attacking army? You see, if they're like, okay, we must find Romans. None here, keep going, keep going. No, they waited at a place, they heard Romans were attacking it. They didn't see no Romans, they said, let's wait. No Romans, no Romans? Okay, we go back. And they did. This is a basic historical fact. Why don't they know this? Why aren't they saying it? I think it's because it's innocent to doubt.
That's 30 seconds. Thank you very much. The last question, perhaps.
Abdullah, like you were complaining that they were not mentioning the good deeds of Prophet of Islam. But my question is that even if you mention the good deeds of the Prophet, that does not justify the violence that he committed. Like if you kill somebody and you forgive the other person, you are still a murderer. So how do you justify that?
Right. I didn't say that they're not mentioning the good parts. I'm saying that in the parts that are supposedly bad, those aren't actually bad. They're actually twisting it or quoting it out of context and to make it fit into what they would like to portray it as, a polished version of to suit their thesis, which doesn't. The Prophet Muhammad, yes, he fought in battles and he fought people. Yes, fine. We're not denying that. He was a prophet. What do you expect from prophets of God? And so on, yeah? But then again, we might say Jesus is nice and peaceful, but in the book of Revelations, when he comes, he'll take a big sword out of his mouth and start massacring people to a nice, peaceful pulp. And that's how he's going to bring his kingdom of peace on. Why not mention this? Oh yeah, but Jesus, but back in the other Gospels, he's okay, he's peaceful. Right? You know what I'm saying? There's double standards. And we're not trying to say that the good is not being left out. We're saying the bad, since they're quoting, is not actually bad. And they're misquoting it, and it's actually false. And that's why we're taking them to task on this issue.
Okay, I'm very sorry there are no more questions. I've just consulted the speakers, and we're now going to move to a summary of their talk. So they're going to talk in the order they began this evening, which is Abdullah will summarise the Muslim position, and Nabil then, I think, or David will, both of them, in fact, will summarise the Christian position as we've heard it. I'm sorry there's not been more time, that's just the way it's worked out, so I apologise about that. Abdullah, are you ready? Sort of?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you 5 minutes.
Okay. Now, I think we're all confused because we don't know what's being fully debated here. Because on one side they're saying, oh, their religion believes in violence, and we're saying, yeah, we use violence for justice. And it's like, okay, are we actually agreeing? Well, in a way, we are agreeing. I think what's at dispute is Muhammad just? That's what we're debating on. Because yes, Islam will use physical force for the sake of justice, just like Augustine said, out of the law of love. It's a Christian fly out of the law of love, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you love someone and you want to help them, you want to help the oppression that they're facing, or the law system that they are undergoing. And unless, anyway, sure. So all I'm saying is Islam a religion of peace? Did it bring peace and tranquility to the areas that it controlled? And here is some quotes from non-Muslim sources. Richard W. Bulliet, professor at Columbia University, said, "My newly studied case of the case, they have shown that justice was generally meted out impartially, irrespective of religion, official status, gender, not being subject to Sharia. Jews and Christians were free to go to their own religious authorities for adjudication of disputes. And in many cases, they went to the Qadi, the Islamic judge, instead." Heinrich Graetz, 17th, 19th century Jewish historian, said, it was in these favorable circumstances that the Spanish Jews came under the rule of the Mohammedans, as whose allies they esteemed themselves the equals of their co-religionists in Babylonia and Persia. They were kindly treated, obtained religious liberty, so on. I'm going to quote Reinhard Dozy, saying the unbounded tolerance of the Arabs must also be taken into account. In religious matters, they put the pressure on no man. Christians preferred their rule to that of the Franks. Zion Zohar, a Jewish historian with a very Jewish name, said, fast when Muslims crossed the Straits of Gibraltar from North Africa and invaded the Iberian Peninsula, Jews welcomed them as liberators from his Christian persecution. The Islamic belief is not forced upon people once the land is taken, and so on. 1,400 years of history bear testament to this. And Philip Mansell mentioned in his book Constantinople, where a rabbi was writing to the oppressed Jews in Europe at the time, under the various Christian regimes, maybe not so Christian, but the Christian regimes. Here in the land of Turks, we have nothing to complain of. We possess great fortunes, much gold and silver is in our hands. We are not oppressed with heavy taxes. Our commerce is free and unhindered. Rich are the fruits of the earth. Everything is cheap, and every one of us lives in peace and freedom. And Adam Smith, as we know, everyone knows Adam Smith, famous philosopher, who said, the ruin of the empire of the Romans, and with all the subversion of all law and order, which happened a few centuries afterwards, produced the entire neglect of that study of the connecting principle of nature to which leisure and security can only give occasion. And then he moves on. After the fall of those great conquerors and civilizations of mankind, the empire of the caliphs seems to have been the first state under which the world enjoyed that degree of tranquility which the cultivation of the sciences requires. And now, the point at hand is, I said Islam is a rational belief. It brings peace to the human mind because it does not ask to believe in contradictory beliefs. Simple, provable, non-contradictory beliefs. Islam is comprehensive. It deals with all sorts of mankind. It regulates mankind's activities. It leaves us free to smash into each other, like bumper cars and so on. It gives us like the highway code, so to speak. Me and my Jewish friend can appreciate this. Islam addresses man's instinctive nature. Christianity doesn't give one. It just says, go by the Spirit. What does that mean? Don't know. Law of love. What does that mean? Love. You know, how do you mean, how do you stop oppression? How do you stop the credit crunch from happening? How do you stop the people in Africa from dying from poverty? How do you stop it? You don't know. Just more Christian aid, that's all. But the vast majority of them won't be helped by that. Solve the problem, not the symptom. Also, Islam deals with the fair distribution of sustenance. Yes, thank you. Islam also it doesn't fight a war for its own sake, it fights war for justice. I have shown this, I have proven this, I have shown that the Prophet Muhammad has said that Dhimmis cannot be oppressed, and again, they haven't answered those hadiths I quoted, completely ignored them. And I'm going to leave it to my friend Yahya who wants to complete the rest of this.
I just wanted to comment that if you look at the methodology of David Wood today, I can understand the predicament that they're in. They're so restricted in their resources. But if we're to go back to the academics who speak the original languages, we'll see that they have a very different image of Islam. If I were to judge Christianity on the New World translation of the Jehovah's Witnesses of the Bible, would I have an accurate picture of Christianity? No. Likewise, I think when you're working on abridged translations and dodgy translations, you're going to have a very dodgy abridged version of Islam.
Islam is a religion of peace, Islam is a religion of peace because it gives the method to achieve peace for all mankind, unlike the Christians have to wait for Jesus to come, massacre people, and then you'll have peace. Anyway, thank you.
We've repeatedly been accused of saying that, well, Islam allows some fighting, therefore it's just really bad. Has that been our accusation? We have shown over and over again from every source we can come up with that Islam calls for violence towards people based on their beliefs. If you disagree with Islam, you have to be fought until you're killed or until you pay the jizya. That's what we're claiming. If you believe it's okay, and there are Muslims who would agree with me, yes, that's what we teach. Right, we're not saying it's wrong in this debate, we're just saying that's what Islam teaches. He's pointed to Christian commentators. We can deal with all of that on this Thursday. Bring everything you've got, my friend. He's pointed out that, he said that Islam is a rational belief founded by evidence. We'll address that on Friday and Saturday when we debate whether Muhammad was a prophet of God and the concept of God in Islam and Christianity. He asks what the solution is to the problems of the world. You have to change people's hearts. That's what Christianity focuses on. In Islam, the idea is to go in there, force them to agree with the government, conquer them, and make them agree with everything Muhammad has forbidden and given. Christianity seeks to change people's hearts so that they love each other. And I tell you, if people followed Christ's commands to love one another as God loves us, there would be peace and joy from pole to pole.
And I also want to talk briefly about the response he gave for the Battle of Tabuk. He says, well, if they went and just sat there and didn't fight a Roman army and came back, doesn't that sound like a defensive army? I will tell you this, that if you actually read the accounts in the history books, what it says is these men went out to fight the Romans and could not find them and came back. It's not that they were waiting to find a defense, where they went there, the Romans weren't there, because they couldn't find them, and then they came back. So yes, this falls perfectly in line. Read the accounts for yourself. I'm not making these things up. So finally, I would like to approach the overview of what's been said by Adnan and Abdullah and Yahya. I've been saying your name the whole time, I'm sorry. Abdullah and Yahya. They've been saying that in Islam there is violence, sure, but it's part of the justice system. You need the violence or these acts that you call violence in order to regulate the system and make sure everything flows smoothly. I would just like to briefly say, why is it then that we cannot discuss these things in Muslim countries? Why is it that in a Muslim country I would not be able to have this debate here? Why is it that we have to go to a Western country in order to be able to discuss these things without me being worried about getting killed? Why is it then that two women who are out in a Muslim country right now who say, I have now become Christian, this is Iran, two women right now in Iran who became Christian 4 months ago are in prison for their beliefs and are waiting their execution? Is it simply because there's some sort of system of justice that needs to be upheld? That's why these two women are being killed? No, it's for their beliefs, straightforward. Why is it that there's violence against women, against apostates, against homosexuals, against all these things in the Quran, in the al-Hadith? It's very clear statements that these problems are supposed to be finished with violence. I tell you, love would be able to handle these situations a lot better. The violence is part of a system that includes violence, and that's what I'm saying. It's not making a better justice, it's making a violent justice, and therefore Islam is not a religion of peace, it's a religion of violence and peace. Peace when there's no violence necessary, but if there's violence in order to make the peace, then let the violence be. That's what Islam looks like when we study the sources.
Just to sum up, I think the issue of Asma being killed by Muslims is important. Yes, Asma did call for people to fight the Muslims. Why? We know from the sources. Abu Afak had been killed by Muslims for saying this: long have I lived, but never have I seen an assembly or collection of people more faithful to the undertaking and their allies when called upon than the sons of Caleb when they assembled. Men who overthrew mountains and never submitted. A rider, Muhammad, who came to them, split them in two, saying, permitted, forbidden of all sorts of things. Had you believed in glory or kingship, you would have followed Tuba.
1 minute.
He said this, and he was killed at the command of Muhammad, and this caused someone to react very harshly. And notice, the Muslims condemned her. They killed a man who was over 100 years old for saying, hey, why is everyone following Muhammad? And this is what we find in the world today. No matter what you do, if you criticize Islam, if you do anything, the solution is violence. If your wife is out of line, the solution is to be here. If you criticize Islam, violence. If you're an apostate, the solution is violence. If you're an unbeliever, the solution is violence. And this is crystal clear from the sources, and yet our friends really do believe that Islam is a religion of peace. Why? Because, I'll tell you the reason, because they've been raised in the West. Jesus' teachings about love and peace have played a role in the West here. And Muslims have now been influenced, and so I praise God for the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ that are still having an impact on the world, even today, even in the Muslim world.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you everyone for persevering through this very long evening. Our next event is on Thursday, the 16th of July, and it's interestingly entitled, Is Christianity a Religion of Peace? David and Abdullah will be debating that this Thursday. Go to our website, www.thedebateinitiative.com, for the address and other details.